Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. New rules for masking in BC.
Most people are reasonable. They understand that when you go to a healthcare setting, that's where people are most at risk.
When it all starts and who is affected. Plus, a brewing debate over Vancouver's scenic views.
In a housing crisis, when we need to maximize every square inch of land that we have.
Why some say so-called view cones need to go. And a real-life superhero in BC's interior.
My pleasure, really. Oh man, honestly.
The massive donation he's made to a fire victim.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. New rules for masking in healthcare settings go into effect in BC starting next Tuesday. The changes come as the province is set to roll out its public campaign for COVID-19 and flu vaccinations. But as Mira Baines reports, not everyone will have to mask up.
Masks are back, at least in some settings. As of October 3rd, you'll need to mask up in all healthcare settings, and that applies to both healthcare workers and visitors. Places like hospitals and long-term care facilities are on the list. But not all patients and residents are required to mask. That will be a personal choice.
I think most people are reasonable. They understand that when you go to a healthcare setting, that's where people are most at risk. Your loved one may be at risk in those settings, and healthcare workers know that as well.
The province released data showing a concerning trend as the province hits respiratory illness season. COVID hospitalizations are up from summer months. One of the reasons is more global travel, which means viruses are also spreading.
I also acknowledge that this is the first step, and it may come to fruition where we go back to masking in large settings.
There are no new rules for schools. The province will roll out vaccinations after Thanksgiving Day long weekend, with priority groups receiving invitations first. COVID-19 and flu vaccines will be widely available at pharmacies and public health clinics.
Primarily, vaccines will be available quite widely in communities through pharmacies, both the COVID vaccine and the flu vaccine, and we encourage people to get them at the same time, and you'll be able to book the appointments at the same time.
The province is hoping more masking and vaccinations will help reduce the pressure on the healthcare system. The BC Nurses Union says there are already major workload concerns.
We know we're going into RSV season, influenza, COVID. As it stands now, we don't have enough nurses in this province to take care of the demands now.
The province says masks will not be mandated for everyone in healthcare settings for a number of reasons, including the fact that residents of long-term care facilities call them home. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Major cities around the world are known for their skylines, and Vancouver, of course, is among them. The mountains, the ocean, its views are iconic. But as Belpuri reports, a debate is brewing over whether those views are a luxury the city can no longer afford to keep.
Vancouver is a beautiful city. People love to be here, in part because of the scenery.
You have the ocean, the water, you have the ships, and facing the mountains as well.
But what doesn't get in the way of the view can get in the way of needs.
In a housing crisis, we need to maximize every square inch of land that we have, and we're cutting buildings in half because of view cones slicing through the sites.
View cones were designed to preserve ocean and mountain vistas from 26 locations in the city. Since 1989, they've limited the size and location of new construction. Over the years, some have become obsolete.
There's trees that have grown in front of them, there's sail masts from boats at the marina, or even 3 of them on the Granville Street Bridge that are only visible from moving vehicles.
Under a proposed review of the policy, protection of Vancouver's views could be partially scrapped in favor of housing. Earlier this week, the BC government ordered 10 municipalities to build more housing over the next 5 years. Vancouver's target is the highest at 28,900.
This means addressing local barriers in construction, including updating zoning bylaws and streamlining local development approval processes.
One real estate expert says views are among luxuries taken for granted that may no longer be affordable.
So you can probably rank the view cones. It's tough to say objectively what's more beautiful than what, but people could probably rank them somewhat, and maybe the bottom third, bottom half go out the window for additional housing.
The motion calling for a staff review of the cones goes to City Council on Wednesday.
If it's housing that it'd be accessible for the majority, then I'm down for covering mountains. If you're going to build like high rises for only the rich, then it's obviously less than ideal.
I hope the price of Vancouver housing will go down by building more houses. So it's good overall.
I come from a big city, Sao Paulo, and they don't have any protection. We have huge buildings all over the place, and that affects the whole logistics of the city. It's just really, it's not a good environment.
With all eyes now on tackling the housing crisis, some views may have to be out of sight. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Last month, the Canadian Border Services Agency seized almost 200 kilograms of opium hidden in shipping containers. One shipment was concealed in the interior structure of a piece of machinery, and the other was found inside a piece of furniture. The total amount of seized drugs has been passed on to the RCMP for investigation. Hundreds of former Shaw technicians could be walking off the job after the company's takeover by Rogers. Around 300 BC workers have voted in favor of job action. United Steelworkers says its members will be prepared to make that happen in late October if the impasse is not resolved. At issue is job security after recent layoffs and voluntary departures. The union says the layoffs call into question Rogers' commitment to create 3,000 new jobs in Western Canada over 5 years, a condition that was federally mandated for the $26 billion takeover to happen. The two sides have been at the bargaining table since February. And SFU teaching support staff walked off the job today at all campuses and were picketing at the Surrey School. All work has been stopped indefinitely until a contract agreement is reached. The union has gone 19 months without a contract. Its demands include a cost of living wage adjustment, wage compensation, and an improved pension plan. In a statement, the university says the union has been offered the maximum wage increase under BC's shared recovery mandate. However, members disagree.
We provide a lot of labor to SFU. About half of the instruction that happens at SFU is given by TSSU members. So that means that we've basically cut down the capacity of this university by half, the capacity of instruction. And on top of that, a lot of faculty members are in solidarity with us.
Dubé says instructors have canceled classes as well at the Surrey campus because they don't want to cross the picket line. Picketing will happen at SFU's Vancouver campus on Friday and the Burnaby campus on Tuesday. Well, fallout from India's alleged involvement in the murder of a Sikh activist in Surrey is now being felt in the U.S. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is meeting with his Indian counterpart today. And as Katie Simpson reports, the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is expected to come up.
The body language reads, all business. The U.S. Secretary of State and his Indian counterpart exchanging brief pleasantries.
It's a pleasure to welcome my friend.
Ahead of a difficult meeting. The murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and Canada's allegation India's government was involved would be addressed, the Prime Minister says he was assured.
I think it's extremely important that all of us continue to engage constructively and seriously with the government of India.
It's a diplomatic tightrope for the Americans, who are actively deepening ties with India as a way to check China's growing power. U.S. President Joe Biden even hosted India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi for a state dinner at the White House this summer.
Two great friends, two great nations, and two great powers. Cheers.
At the same time, they say they're pressing on Canada's behalf.
We have consistently engaged with the Indian government on this question and have urged them to cooperate.
U.S. lawmakers are also requesting an official briefing. On social media, some offer to support Canada and its investigation, with promises to work with local and federal government officials to protect the Sikh community.
Well, certainly that's very, very, very concerning and very, very serious.
Some deeply alarmed American Sikh activists are meeting those lawmakers. Pritpal Singh says he was warned by the FBI of a credible threat against him days after Nijjar's murder.
We are on the threat that it can happen to us also.
That's why we are here.
He believes the threat was from India, though the FBI would not confirm it to him or comment to CBC News.
Are you concerned for your own safety right now?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. But we are concerned. We are not frightened. We are not scared.
Given the sensitivity, U.S. lawmakers are choosing their words carefully, emphasizing cooperation and accountability. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
A second BC Ferries vessel will be temporarily out of service to undergo repairs after the Thanksgiving long weekend, and that will result in 14 canceled sailings in October. Engineers discovered a crack in a ballast on the Spirit of Vancouver Island, which travels the Tsawwassen to Swartz Bay route. That vessel will be under repair for 9 days starting on October 10th. The move comes as the Coastal Renaissance vessel remains out of service. It is expected to return in early December. Well, protesters gathered in front of MLA offices across the province today, marking a day of action for old-growth forests.
We're here to try to protect these forests while we still can, and we're here after the worst wildfire season on record. And we know that these forests are essential to keeping our communities safe from climate change and from worsening floods and fires.
Old-growth rallies were held in 17 locations across BC. Protesters are calling for an immediate stop to old-growth logging, financial support to impacted First Nations, and the full implementation of the province's old-growth strategic review process. A proposed three-berth marine container terminal in Delta has been issued an environmental assessment certificate by the province, meaning if completed, the project would not have negative effects on the environment. The proposed Roberts Bank Terminal 2 would expand the existing container terminal and, according to the province, open up what it calls Canada's throttled marine supply chain. The port says it will create more than 17,000 well-paying jobs and generate hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. There is not yet a date for construction to begin. And this morning, BC downgraded the drought levels of 7 watersheds, but 4 other regions saw their levels go up. Vancouver Island, the Lower Mainland, the Sunshine Coast, and the Basin, that includes Whistler and Hope, have gone up from level 5 to 4, gone down from level 5 to 4, rather. But East and North Peace, Finlay, and the Parsnip Basin, just north of Prince George, have been upgraded to level 5 drought. Experts say we are not out of the woods just yet.
While it's going to take these repeated rain events, hopefully really steady rain events, and we just need to be patient and understand that we're still in a drought condition right now, even though we fortunately are getting some rain.
She says recurrent moderate to heavy rain is needed in order to get out of drought conditions. For more on this, let's check in with Darius Madavi, who has been keeping a close eye on the drought situation. Darius, what is it about this, the significant rainfall that really isn't making much of a difference?
Well, it seems that even though we saw as much as 250 millimeters of rain over just 3 days earlier this week on parts of the island, especially the West Coast and the North Island, it looks like it didn't have too much of an impact. At least we're not feeling it yet. So all that rain, we did come down a level on the South Coast, as you said, but it's probably not going to be enough to bring us down further. We might still see some lingering impacts of that rainfall as it might soak into the ground a bit more, but it's not going to make too much of a difference. And it just really underscores how much rain we're going to need, how severe our drought situation is across the province. Look at how much of the province is still in drought level 5, some places getting worse even in the Northeast, to really make an impact. It's going to be a long while before we're actually out of this. One rain event is not going to be enough. I also want to talk once more about where we were at 1 year ago. This was last year at the end of September, when we're leading into a historic fall drought. This is where we're at now. Even at the peak of our fall drought last year, we weren't anywhere near what we're at right now. So this is a serious situation, and we're going to keep seeing it for a while yet. Hopefully we'll see some more significant rainfall move in, and that could make a difference. It's not going to come this weekend, though. We're mostly drying up across the province. We've got some snow coming in for some of the peaks, a bit of rain making its way into the interior, but not really going to make too much of a difference. The little bit of rain we're still seeing on the Lower Mainland is not really doing much. The island is totally dry, and as we head into tomorrow, all we're seeing is some clearing, not just here, but also on the island. A little bit of cloud tonight, but then we're clearing up here in Vancouver and really across the South Coast.
All right, thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Anita.
It was a collection that took decades to build, but now a man who lost his 34,000 comics to a wildfire in the Shuswap region is getting a big donation. It wasn't just a beloved collection, it was also his retirement plan. But a real-life superhero has stepped up, and we were there to see it happen.
Totally awesome.
I was watching Situation on Fires on CBC News, and I saw Barney interviewed, and he was just describing how he'd lost his whole house. And then he said he'd lost 34,000 comics, and that had been his retirement plan. And I just thought, well, I've got a collection, a few boxes, and haven't really looked at them in at least 10 years. And they're not part of my retirement plan. So I thought I could easily part with them for a good cause like this.
We got some in here that I've collected.
Really? Oh, that's great. That's great.
So, I had all of this, the Alien Agenda.
Yeah.
I had all of it.
Okay.
So now this is the beginning of it again. So that's awesome.
That's great. That's fantastic. I'm so happy.
Oh yeah, just because even that one, I think I lost that in the fire. And you get them back. Totally.
Hey man, my pleasure, really. Oh man, honestly.
It's totally awesome.
Well,
to get something back. It's beyond what I thought. This is look at this, Cosmic Odyssey. You don't know how much I've been trying to get these again since I lost them. I don't like having any missing issues out of a collection.
Yeah.
I gotta fill it. So now I got a lot more researching to do. I don't know if it's a blessing from you or another curse. Yeah. But it's just totally awesome.
Oh, that's great.
Now I got a jumping off point. Start again.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Such a heartwarming story. I remember when we first aired, the fire destroying this man's comic book collection, and it was just heartbreaking for everyone. So this is really nice to see. All right, car owners woke up to an unpleasant surprise this morning with gas prices across Metro Vancouver shooting up 10 cents a litre. Here's what some drivers had to say.
Gas prices should be going up there, right? Because we're running out. So realistically, we should be trying to incentivize people to drive electric.
When we're not driving, not so much, but at home it's a massive cost that we need to account for.
Yeah, so
we're looking at buying electric bikes.
I guess it do, right? Because I drive almost every day to work back in Sweden, and the Swedish gas prices are very high. I think in Europe in general is very high, so yeah. I drive an electric car, so the gas prices, I don't even think twice about them. So.
Not yet. I filled up a few days ago at 201. I thought I was lucky at that. But driving is much more of a luxury now than it was a year or two ago, even though prices have kind of so. But we'll survive because everything will be electric soon enough.
Some stations are charging $2.14 a litre, the highest gas prices the region has seen since October of 2022. National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is this Saturday, and many Canadians will wear an orange shirt to honor residential school survivors. But organizers in Victoria are warning people to do their research before buying an orange shirt. With the growing popularity comes people taking advantage for economic gain. Many artists have seen their artwork stolen or funds raised from the shirts that don't end up going to the cause.
There are many people out there that are profiting from that story of residential school, and they're not contributing any way in the healing that orange shirt they is trying to do.
There are several official and approved locations you can purchase an authentic orange shirt at. In Victoria, you can go to victoriaorangeshirtday.com. And one of the survivors being recognized on Saturday is Phyllis Webstad, the creator of Orange Shirt Day 10 years ago. It's based on her experiences as a 6-year-old attending residential school in BC. Phyllis shared her personal story with CBC Kids news contributor Ainara Alain. Ainara started the conversation with a question from a 10-year-old girl in Toronto.
Victoria heard your story, and she had a question about that moment that they took your shirt away. Here she is.
Hi, my name is Victoria. My question is, why did they take your orange shirt, and how did you feel when they took it?
Okay. The mission is what we called it, St. Joseph Indian Residential School. It's about 20 minutes out of Williams Lake, and when we got there, everybody's clothing was taken away, not just my clothing. Then we were stripped and we had to take a shower, and they cut our hair. At Granny's, my baths were by the stove. I'd never seen water coming out of the walls before, and we were frightened, like 5- and 6-year-olds. And a lot of them were like that. We didn't have electricity or showers, and no matter what we did or tried to fight to get our clothing, we were 5- and 6-year-olds. They weren't going to listen to us. So no matter how much we cried or protested or tried to fight back, there was no use. And I'm often asked by children, how did it feel? And what I say is, when you're at the mall or you're at the grocery store and you lose track of your parents and you're little and you're just suddenly frozen in fear. You're just so scared you could just pee your pants. It was just really scary for a new 6-year-old.
When we see like Orange Shirt Day and, residential schools, I feel like when we see it depicted, we see them a little bit older. Like, I would say like 10 maybe, which is still awful. But to think that you were like that small, like my brother just started grade 1. And he's still just learning so much, and he doesn't know that you don't really know fully what's going on.
And this is why this is so effective, is because it's a simple story that people can understand, students, children can understand, that everybody has families. Can imagine getting them stolen and taken and not being able to do a darn thing about it.
This coverage can be upsetting and invite painful feelings or memories. If you or someone you care about is looking for support, you can reach the National Residential School Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419. It operates 24 hours, and it's available for survivors, intergenerational survivors, and their loved ones. Mandatory masking is returning to healthcare facilities. Why that change is important and what it means for you in our live interview after the break. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. If you've scrolled through TikTok or Instagram, you may have come across a trend where men are asked how often they think about the Roman Empire. Well, CBC's Amy Bell spoke to Matt McCarty, an assistant professor of Roman archaeology at UBC, on why some men love the Roman Empire.
Hello, Matt.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I guess this begs the question, how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
I would say at least 8 hours a day, every day, but then I get paid to do it.
Now, this isn't the first time the Roman Empire has made it into popular media, though, is it?
No, and I think that that's why people keep thinking about and thinking with the Roman Empire, is because we're inundated with a media landscape, everything from Gladiator to HBO's Rome to, every late night documentary that you can find flipping channels about the inventions and the greatness of the Romans. And those are the things that people talk about and think about when they think about Rome. But I was surprised when this came out, and all of a sudden my phone started blowing up with everyone I know saying, look, we think about the Roman Empire all the time. So maybe there's a little bit of people ask the question and they're
And you
led to an
realize,
answer. Yeah.
you're like, finally, it's your time to shine. What, regardless if you think about it once a day or once a year, there are some things when we look around that we have inherited from the Roman Empire. So what are some of those things that people might not realize we do, adopt from them?
Well, I think you can think about this in two ways. In the physical world that we inhabit, and I'm an archaeologist, so of course I'm going to start there. There are so many things we encounter here in Vancouver that in some ways owe themselves to the Roman Empire. So for example, if you go downtown, walk in front of the Vancouver Art Gallery, the facade is designed in a classical way. The other thing we have to think about that we encounter every day is ideas of empire and colonialism.
Right.
Both of these are Latin words, right? Colonia, imperium. And when, as we get up to, Truth and Reconciliation Day, every British and French administrator who was involved in colonization and the creation and expansion of empire was reading Roman authors.
Definitely something to think about, and I guess we'll just wait and see what the next TikTok trend will bring us. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you.
All right. Matt McCarty is an assistant professor of Roman archaeology at UBC's Ancient Mediterranean and Near Eastern Studies.
Well, earlier in the show, we outlined the provincial update that's coming on wearing masks in public health facilities. Healthcare workers, visitors, contractors, and volunteers will be required to mask as of October 3rd. Now, we want to dive deeper into what this means for British Columbians. Joining me now is Dr. Iris Gorfinkel, a family physician and founder of Prime Health Research. Doctor, why is this move so significant?
I'm super excited. Because for once, we see a province being proactive about masking, proactive before hospital systems get overwhelmed, before we don't have enough ICU beds. That's super exciting because the vulnerable and their families can now go to hospital with the confidence that people are doing everything they can to prevent them from getting infected with COVID. And I only hope that this lights the path for other provinces and the territories.
Should this have gone further, though? I mean, some will say, healthcare workers perhaps especially, that they also need protection from patients coming in, but it's not mandatory for patients.
Well, this is true, but understand, the perfect storm is about to happen. We're going into cooler weather, and the COVID actually transmits more easily in cool weather, as does influenza, as do cold viruses like RSV. So for this reason, to protect our limited number of healthcare workers, to protect the vulnerable patients and their families, and never mind, what about the long-term consequences? Sometimes that seems to be falling off the conversation altogether. Long-term complications, and I'm not talking about only long COVID. I'm talking about the risk of heart attacks, the risk of strokes, the risk of long-term lung and heart problems. These all increase. So I'm excited that British Columbia is doing this. And as I mentioned, let's hope that other provinces and the territories follow suit.
So with this being the perfect storm, as you say that we're coming up onto, do you think that this mask requirement will just be a seasonal change?
Well, I think for now, I think we have to play that by ear to see how it goes. Judging from Australia's flu season, they had a flu season very much like last year. But the hospitalizations were no higher than they were in previous, like in last year. So that's a good thing. But even so, we cannot take anything for granted about what future vaccinations will bring. It is a strong recommendation that people get vaccinated. But understand, the vaccines, unfortunately, did not prove to have very long durability. In other words, they didn't last as long as we were hoping they would. So that's a serious problem. So our success will rely on the combination of things we do, the hand washing, the air filtration, of course, masking and vaccinations.
Just quickly before we let you go, masks, it's no secret, are often seen as a political symbol instead of just a health precaution. How do you convince or what do you say to people who really have no desire to wear a mask anymore? A lot of people are tired of that.
I think that hospitals have to remain safe places where people can go because they want to get well. They don't want to pick up an extra disease like COVID, like influenza, like many cold viruses. So that's one aspect to it. But I think the polarization needs to end. We need to agree on what we all value, which is keeping loved ones and vulnerable people safe, keeping the general population safe from long-term complications of COVID-19.
Dr. Iris Gorfinkel, thank you so much for joining us live tonight.
Many thanks for having me.
A full-fledged battle is heating up in Alberta between the province and the feds, why power production and new proposed limits are causing friction. Next.
This is a city light pole, and it's being replaced because something is eating away at its base. And there's not a darn thing the city can do about it, even though they know exactly what's causing the corrosion. Dogs are the problem. Dogs and their
dog urine.
According to this city engineer, they just lift up those canine legs and wreak havoc on city streets.
Any acid will eat through the metal, and that's pretty much what's it seems to be happening here.
So far this year, 300 light poles have been earmarked for removal, mostly in areas around city parks.
Dog's got to go someplace, fire hydrant or a pole.
True, but this instinctive thing dogs seem to have about poles has cost Vancouver about $300,000 so far. But look a little more closely into this problem, and you realize some dogs are being maligned unfairly.
They cannot be accusing female dogs of rusting the bottoms of the light poles.
Darn right, this idea of using light poles as toilets is a male thing, a territory thing. Females do it differently.
Not a leg left here. A squatter.
Still, with half the dog population out there using the poles, damage continues to be done. The city's only defense, the new replacement poles have all been sprayed with a zinc coating. It'll help, but it's the kind of problem that's not going to dry up. Deborah Goebel, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith is taking aim at Ottawa's target for a net zero power grid. As Erin Collins tells us, she says meeting that deadline would mean blackouts in the province.
Alberta's premier panning Ottawa's plan to green Canada's grid.
They are disastrously uninformed and totally disconnected from reality.
The draft clean electricity law, an attempt to get to net zero by 2035. A big problem for Alberta, which relies on natural gas for 60% of its power. Despite a boom in clean energy, gas still needed when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. Something the Premier says won't change by 2035.
Our province would be left at risk of blackouts and brownouts at the mercy of minus 30-degree deep freezes during the coldest months of the winter.
The independent operator of Alberta's grid echoed the government's message just an hour earlier.
The provincial grid will need sufficient dispatchable generation to meet the cold, dark, windless winter nights that we have in this province.
But in a statement, the federal minister of the environment wrote any claim that building a clean electricity grid will lead to blackouts is misinformation designed to inflame, not inform, urging the regulator to publicly release its analysis that underlies these claims. Well, this economist wants to see the math too, but he agrees getting Alberta's grid to net zero by 2035 will be challenging.
From my point of view, it's really always been incumbent on the province and the feds to meet to discuss the required changes to the regulation to make it more workable.
Alberta clashing with Ottawa over energy policy is nothing new. The province wants the greening of Canada's grid pushed to 2050. Alberta's premier ready to defy the federal government with untested legislation aimed at limiting federal overreach.
We're preparing a Sovereignty Act motion, and I'm hoping we don't have to use it. That's why we're at the table having these negotiations.
This public campaign a sign that negotiations on the future of Canada's electricity grid are heating up. Erin Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Canada has pledged $2.5 million in aid for the humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh. More than 74,000 ethnic Armenians have fled the enclave since Sunday after Azerbaijan's military took control of the territory. And in a major development overnight, the self-proclaimed government there says it is dissolving itself. Officials say the decision is due to the, quote, current difficult military political situation. It means the unrecognized state will no longer exist by the end of this year. This comes after a 24-hour military offensive from Azerbaijan, which killed at least 200 ethnic Armenians. More than 60% of Nagorno-Karabakh's population has left, and Nagorno-Karabakh is recognized as part of Azerbaijan. It had been run by ethnic Armenians for 3 decades. Well, Washington, D.C. is careening towards another government shutdown. Negotiations on raising the limit on federal debt have stalled. But as Paul Hunter shows us, congressional Republicans are keeping one thing going, an inquiry into impeaching U.S. President Joe Biden.
It didn't quite have the feel of the makings of a political upheaval.
At least 10 times, Joe Biden lied to the American people.
But as Republicans opened their impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden, they certainly talked the talk.
The House Oversight and Accountability Committee has uncovered a mountain of evidence revealing how Joe Biden abused his public office for his family's financial gain.
Problem is, as Democrats were quick to underline, despite multiple prior investigations by Republicans, zero evidence of that has ever been put forward.
If the Republicans had a smoking gun or even a dripping water pistol, they would be presenting it today, but they've got nothing on Joe Biden.
The first witnesses, legal experts who likewise see little so far.
I do not believe that the current evidence would support articles of impeachment.
Democrats see the whole thing as a sham aimed at besmirching Biden ahead of next year's election. The president himself was, meanwhile, forcefully slamming his likely opponent next year, Donald Trump, and Trump's most vociferous supporters.
I believe there's no place in America, none, for political violence.
With Trump having slammed Biden the night before at a speech in Michigan, Americans may well see the 2024 campaigns as now in unofficial full swing. As Trump soars ahead in his party's contest to be the nominee, He skipped a second primary debate, his Republican rivals often then spiraling into this.
We want to get things done.
Thank you for speaking while I'm interrupting. While I'm speaking.
All of that as the U.S. braces for a government shutdown starting Saturday night as lawmakers bicker over spending. Most government services would stop indefinitely, but not the impeachment inquiry, set to continue for weeks with or without evidence. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
A story about ants and a man who studies them. After the break, why we see fewer ants in the winter and what we can learn about them.
You find them in the most unsuspecting place. Aha, the honey fungus, which is an Armillaria genus. I absolutely love taking folks out on forays. All of the good mushrooms are found off of the path. There's some sweating mushrooms. They are producing guttation. It is just so fun to look for and find these mushrooms. There we go. Look at that beauty. Cat's tongue jelly. Boop, boop, boop. My name is Mel Hahn, and I am on the board of directors of the Alberta Mycological Society. Our main purpose, our main goal is to just share the love of mushrooms. We recommend that you're 110% confident before you put any mushroom inside of you. We're not just sharing the way that they look and finding them, but also what they can do for us and their more maybe medicinal value or their functional value. Mushrooms can do so much more than just provide us protein. This is the blue staining elf cup. They produce a pigment that is an excellent semiconductor that is currently being tested as a sustainable replacement to use in optic tech. Welcome to GAMP. I got into mushrooms during the first summer of the pandemic. The community is so warm and welcome and inviting. And it's also fair to say that they are really just a bunch of fun guys. Bucket list fungi. I'm very excited to see it. Ah! I actually call myself a myco-evangelist. I'm here to spread the good spores and inoculate the masses, and it is just such a joy to do that on social media, talking about something that I love so much. This is Echinoderma, the freckled dapperling. So it is safe to say that I fell in love with mushrooms. I'm an illustrator by trade. About a year ago, I decided that I wanted to upgrade, and I'm going to the U of A hopefully next year in order to pursue a biology degree in order to study mushrooms, because they really are just so appealing to me. There's really so much that mushrooms can offer that isn't just the scientific side. It really is just so all-encompassing. They're so much more than just the mushroom.
As the temperature dips, you may see fewer ants, and for some, like me, that is a-okay. But for one local collector, the tiny creatures are the main reason to go outside. Liam Harrop went on a hunt with the ant keeper to learn why he thinks the bugs are so special.
I've always had an innate interest, I guess, for ants especially, but insects in general and just nature. As a kid, I would just collect ants and throw them into a jar. But now for like the more professional side of it, you would collect a queen ant or a handful and you raise them and start colonies. And at the point when you actually have a colony, you become an ant keeper. So I have Probably about 20 colonies that are in a decent, I would say, young stage. And I do have 20 or 30 small colonies from this year that I've just caught as single queens. Some of them have a little bit of workers.
How do you find your ants?
Within the ant keeping community, we'll just take strolls out in parks kind of around wetland areas, forested areas.
So if we were to collect these ants, how would we do that?
Anytime I'm out intentionally ant keeping, I'll bring this with me.
This is like quite the ant collecting kit.
Typically the queens are like boogieing, right? So you got to be quick before you lose them. I have some test tubes done up. They do need humidity or they will desiccate quite quickly. Gotta chase them in. Again, we're demonstrating. I wouldn't do this with a worker typically, but we're not going to find queens and then get them in there.
Wow, okay.
This is an aspirator. So we'll take this and use it literally to suck up eggs, larvae of other colonies.
Do you think they're generally misunderstood?
I would say so, yes. 90% of the people just see ants and they just immediately want to get rid of them. They don't even think about the benefit they have to their yard, to their garden, to the environment. With the ants, you see this daily activity. You have different case doing different jobs within the nest, and depending on what kind of setup you have, you can see it all happen. They have their little societies and their individual interactions with each other. You could watch them for hours.
I don't know that I could watch them for hours. I get a little bit of the heebie-jeebies there, Darius, but I have a feeling that you perhaps know a thing or two about ants.
I know a thing or two. Did you know you can microwave an ant and it will be totally fine?
I feel like you did tell me this.
I might have.
And I shared this fact with someone else, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorites. People who listen to On the Coast might have heard that one before. So sorry, I don't usually recycle my facts. But yeah, just make sure you don't put it on a plate because the plate will heat up and then the plate will cook the ant. So just be careful of that. Only an ant. All right, let's talk weather. I want to talk about the freezing levels. I saw that we got some snow up in Whistler, on Whistler Mountain and Blackcomb. So I thought we should take a look at our freezing levels because they have come down to where we're getting some snow in different parts of the province, not in our local mountains here in Vancouver, but you can see some of the other peaks across the province. We are getting some snow. Our freezing levels last night at around 4 a.m., or through the night, but I just picked 4 a.m., were enough to get some snow on Whistler and Blackcomb. And if we take a look, that was most of the day. It remained below zero for the very peaks of those mountains. And over the next 24 hours, our freezing level will remain so that we get some snow accumulating across some of the peaks across the province. So we looked at the rain accumulation earlier in the hour. Now let's take a look at the snow just a little bit, but it is the first sort of hint of what's to come. Temperatures cooling down, so a little bit of just fun to see. And I just wanted to make the animation where we fly over the mountains. I just had some fun. So let's take a look at our temperatures. For those of us who don't live on the top of a mountain, we're still not too bad. I know Anita was wearing her puffer today inside when it was 20 degrees, so that was silly. But we have temperatures that are just below seasonal now coming up through the weekend as we have a ridge of high pressure build in that chases out the rain. So we have a pretty clear weekend and some sun pretty much across the province, maybe a little bit of rain lingering for some places up north and in central BC, but even there it's by no means guaranteed. We have temperatures come back up to around where they should be by Sunday, and then as we get into the beginning of next week, we might have another system move through that should bring temperatures back down a little bit, bring some more rain to the province, but we're still quite a ways out. We're not sure that's going to happen, so we'll wait and see. A little bit of rain tonight still in parts of BC, but by no means guaranteed in any of those. Once again, just a chance of scattered showers popping up. Same thing tomorrow. Definitely not going to see it all these places, but again, chance of rain, chance of some thunderstorms, especially in central BC. But here in Vancouver, it looks like we are clear through the weekend. We're going to have some cloud that clears up tomorrow morning. We got some sun through the weekend, and then it's next week that our rain is likely to return.
I'll try not to take any of your digs personally, Darius, but I'm starting to a little bit.
Oh, well, what can I do?
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's not your most typical of pets, and it's a bird that's not universally loved. How a magpie was adopted by a family and thrived. That's next. Magpies are known as cheeky birds, and their ability to destroy can infuriate many farmers and gardeners. But they are also remarkable animals. Meet Circle, a most marvelous magpie.
Circle just showed up one day as a young bird, and his parents disappeared pretty early on, so I think we're basically his parents. And that's not a great thing when you've got wild birds, because they imprint on you and they can't survive out in the wild and stuff. But I think we've done pretty well in getting him some friends and learning how to hunt and do all the things that magpies do.
It was really stressful at first because we didn't know if we could do it because he was so little at the time. But he seems to have thrived, and he definitely is connected to us. Unfortunately, we kind of wanted him to grow up and he'd be on his merry way. We didn't anticipate that he'd love us so much. So when Circle first came into our lives, I had a job where I could just come and go as I needed to, and he needed to eat pretty much every half an hour. So a lot of my life was just keeping him alive. So I'd run home from work on my 15-minute breaks or my lunch break, because I was only a block away, and I'd come feed him food. And it was fascinating seeing him living and thriving in a human environment. His speech was developing in a human way instead of a wild magpie way. So his baby jabber was coming out as human jabber instead of magpie jabber.
Hi. Hello. Good bird. Good bird. Give you kisses. Where? Right here? Right here? Good job. Good job.
He is a good mimic, so he says a lot of words. He says hello, he says hi, he says kiss me, I'm a prince. He says, we were trying to teach him like the old Bill Matheson, and that's the weather for this evening, good evening, but it's a little bit too much for him, I think.
You think you're a good boy? Circle's a good boy? I don't think you're a good boy at all. So we'd call him home by going, and he's learnt that call, so when he's nervous, he needs us to come home, you can hear him on the buildings going.
I had a jar of pickles sitting on the counter there, and Circle was over on it, banging at it, because he pecks at everything and pushes things off. But then I heard the lid fall onto the ground, and I was like, what the? So he had figured out how to open the pickle jar and steal pickles out of it. Circle is a bit of a disaster, because he'll destroy everything and poop on everything, but he's one of the family, so you
put up with it.
Do what you got to do.
I describe him as a mix of a toddler and a cat with wings. Cats, anything on the counters will be thrown off the counters, and that is very much the same with him, but the difference is he has wings so he can get away from me when I tell him no. Everybody says on our TikTok videos and stuff, we would love to have a magpie. I want a magpie, I want a magpie. And we're like, you don't want a magpie.
They're good to have around. I like magpies, but I don't think you want one in your house. It's a lot of work. Magpies hide their food in little caches around, and so they carefully do it, and they watch to make sure that other magpies don't see where it is, and if they do see where it is, they'll take it out and they'll go hide it somewhere else. So our house has little caches of food all around it, which is very...
everywhere. So when you brought the smoked salmon in, it just went in all
we
the
were
clothing,
cleaning for a long time,
all the couch grooves.
finding every bit of smoked salmon. I was cagey about telling people about him because I don't think it's legal to have a magpie as a pet, and he is not a pet. He is a wild bird who just hangs out here a lot.
We never call him ours. Yeah. He is very much, the door is always open for him to leave when he wants. And there have been a couple of times where we thought maybe this is it, because he's made really good friends with a girl or something. A girl magpie, not a girl human. But yeah, there's been a couple seasons where we're like, this might be it. He might never come home, but he always comes home. We never intended to help the other birds in the neighborhood. They just started to see that Circle was coming inside and that he had like a really good life of, what's that food? Where did you get that? Who gave you that? And so when he would come inside, they'd see that, and then they'd decide, oh, they're safe. And so he kind of taught the entire neighborhood of birds that we are a safe space to be. And birds have actually come to us with stuff tied around their ankles. And when that happens, they feel safe enough with us to grab them and actually untie them. And they seem to know that we're here to help. Magpies are incredibly intelligent animals. And I think that's part of what makes them such a nuisance, is that they know how to take things apart. They know how to puzzle things out. They know how to get to things they want to get to, and they will do it.
Everything that you've heard is terrible about magpies probably is exaggerated, just because they do pick through garbage and they
tear things apart.
And you know, they're pests in that way, but they're pests because they're very intelligent and very inquisitive. They're actually not protected by the Migratory Bird Act in Alberta, because they are a pest species. In fact, if you go to the Alberta website and you look up magpies, the only thing you'll find is traps for magpie, how to build a trap to catch a magpie.
So when I have people come up to me and tell me that a magpie is just a pest animal, and why in the world would you want that to be your friend, and they're such a nuisance, it's sad, because really they're just being themselves. And what I sincerely love about them is the thing that kind of makes them a pest: their inquisitive behavior, their spunky attitudes. So it's just getting to know them and who they are and what they do, and it all has meaning, and it's all really cool.
Edmonton, yes, we're resourceful, we're intelligent, they're beautiful, they're colorful, they have every color of the rainbow contained in their tail. If you're gonna pick a creature to represent a spirit of a place, I think a magpie is the spirit of Edmonton. Magpies in the wild live about 5 years, and most of the time they end up getting hit by cars, or
eating too much salt,
eating too much human food, and then they disappear. The magpies that we see in the area, they're only usually around for about 2 years or whatever. But this guy is now officially 4 years old, and I've heard that magpies in captivity can live to be 20 years old. So while he is not a pet or in captivity and can go where he wants to go, he is well cared for. So I suspect we might have this guy kicking around for another 15 years or so here. And we'll be here for him.
I don't know that I have a lot to say about that piece. I think it speaks for itself. It's pretty amazing, though, the way they have adopted this little guy and how all the other birds come to them. Pretty cool. All right, thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. We leave you with shots of bears at Katmai National Park.